How's it going, everybody? Welcome to Tuesday, right? Oh man. So, I had an interesting week. I mean, other than like, of course, for those that maybe you missed Saturday's video, literally after my live stream last week, uh, my dog reheard herself. So, that was fun. But she had emergency surgery, got it taken care of. So she did a different surgery, all that kind of stuff. But anyway, um, she's good. She's good. She's been moving around more, which is a big positive sign. That's nice. Yeah. So in general, dog in recovery, different recovery this time. I covered that in Saturday's video. So if you really want more details as to exactly what happened there, check that out if you missed it. If you saw it, you know what's going on, right? Then I found out. I'm trying to think here. I have to go down my timeline of things. I met up. Oh, I went to a friend's bachelor party Saturday. It should be noted. These are friends that I met playing Magic the Gathering. So my bachelor party, it was pretty nerdy. We went axe throwing, which I've never done before. That was a ton of fun. And then we went bowling. I know, real wild. But it was like a group of guys, some of their friends. The guy I know, who I got him a job at one point, and he's been a friend of mine for years now. I think closing in on like 10 years. And then his brother, who I've known for about 12. So, yeah, it was just fun hanging out, seeing some friends I haven't seen in a little bit because we're all kind of scattered all over the place and busy and just being dumb idiots, like throwing axes and bowling. We were definitely like, we went bowling and we're like, we are totally the old men here. Most people around us were like very clearly early 20s, maybe a couple people in their 30s, and it's like all of us are around 40, so it's like, man. And then Sunday I went to a brand new fish store that recently opened up. I've had somebody in comments like, I think 3 videos now. Yeah. Basically saying like, hey, you need to go check out this fish store. It's brand new. I guess he knows the owner. So I made time in my afternoon Sunday. I drove down to the shop, got to hang out with the owner for a little bit, talk to him for a little bit. Really cool dude named Peter. This is Eurofish is the name of the store, which when I first read the name of comments, I was like, Eurofish doesn't sound like anything that's going to be in Seattle, right? It was like wondering if it was some reference to some other company, like trying to get a job in the fish trade or something. I was like, that doesn't make any sense. But went and talked with him, and so we'll probably be doing a video very soon, kind of talking about his story, similar to what I did with like Jason at Redfish Bluefish, just going over like why he opened a store, what his experience has been so far, what got him into the hobby, because he does a lot of breeding. The cool thing about his particular shop is many of the things in his store he breeds himself, and it's stuff that he's very experienced. He's been in the hobby for 20 plus years, does a ton of breeding at home. So it was kind of neat to see a mixture of things that he gets from very specific suppliers, and then also stuff that he breeds himself specifically for his store that is not things you would see in like a normal fish shop. So if I went to Aquarium Co-op or something like that, I'm not going to see a lot of the fish that he's keeping, which makes him different and interesting. So be looking out for that video, because I think you guys will like it. He's got a really cool shop. It's not super huge, but it's also not super tiny. I think he's done a great job of making it a cool open space. So yeah, look forward to that. We'll do that relatively soon. I think I'm talking back and forth with him basically today, tomorrow to schedule things, but I might be back at his store as early as this week to start filming, but it'll probably take it wouldn't be like this Saturday's video. It'd probably be like a week after at the earliest, just because doing something like that definitely takes a lot more editing. But yeah, It'd be cool. I want to show you guys because I think his story is really awesome. I think you guys are going to really appreciate it and enjoy it. And for those of you who are local to the Seattle area, it might give you a new fish store to go check out. So yeah. Repost. Sure, I can repost the GoFundMe for my pupper. But at this point, like, you guys have done so much, I almost feel terrible asking for any further help. But there's that for those who are curious about helping out Madago and her closing in on $7,500 worth of surgery. Yeah. Thankfully, the second surgery was paid for, though, for those who didn't see that video. In the sense that the surgeon who does it, if things happen with a certain period of time, and I don't know what it is, like, he made it sound like it was like within a month, but I think it's got to be less than that. They just cover you and take care of the secondary surgery to help. So it was really nice going in there and knowing, like, I'm not staring at some other giant massive bill, that they're just going to take care of my dog and make sure that she has the best chance for recovery. So yeah. I literally took her out for a walk, like, right before stream. So she's been doing good. She loves... Previously, right, I was trying to get her move as little as possible. So the fact that she gets to go out on walks, she tries to go a little too fast. She'll, like, pull her leg up and just try to, like, three-legged hop, which is kind of adorable. I'm going to try and get some, like, filming of it so folks can see her out moving and stuff like that, just for those who really care about watching her recovery. But yeah, her energy is, like, really good. Nabokov fan who asked in chat, and I'll get to topic in just a sec. Sorry, guys. I'm lots of catch up. I apologize. Her energy is really good, but she can't, like, if she starts running too much, she doesn't actually, like, work that leg. And what I need her to do is walk slow so that she'll slowly build confidence and strength back. And then it's basically about a month from now is where I have to start pushing her to do, like, longer walks and really kind of do, like, the rehab, if you will, of getting the confidence and strength in that false joint that occurs because of how the surgery happened. But she's doing good. She's been pretty happy in general, other than, like, waking me up at 1 and 2 in the morning because she doesn't want to be in her crate. She just wants to, like, flop and be open and free. But I think part of that is the medications mess with her stomach a little bit. So she just, like, has kind of a no fun time with her stomach and wants to be able to be free and do all that kind of stuff. So whatever. She usually is pretty good about, like, I let her out. I have some, like, indoor dog pads just in case, just because I know her medication messes with her a lot. So that if she has to, and she's potty trained to use them, she can go to the bathroom while I'm, like, hibernating temporarily because I'm exhausted. Especially when she wakes me up at, like, 2 in the morning and I'm, like, barely ever slept at that point. I'm like, zombie, let dog out. Okay, be good, dog. go back to sleep. Oh man, it's a thing. Anyway, I want to dive into this topic, and part of this, actually, right off the kick, Michael Yingle mentioned, honestly, great question. I'm thinking of doing an RODI, English, and remineralizing, mostly for betas, but might as well for the Africans I'm doing it. I know plenty who don't use RODI, so reverse osmosis deionization, for fresh water. And that's going to kind of get into our topic here, which is, do fish keepers, us aquarists, overcomplicate or oversimplify things? And what I mean is, I just realized I said simplify them because my ability to write English is also terrible. I'm gonna change the title. It reads strange. There we go. Problem solved. And what I mean is this. Let's think about, like, the person who really wants to do a tank on a budget, and it's like, maybe I want no substrate, I want a bare bottom, or maybe I want just, like, the cheapest gravel I can get. I want to have an unheated tank, or I want to, like, go as simple as possible. And some people might say that, like, the Wallstead method, as an example, is like a simplification. Or we could look at somebody, when it comes to the creator space, look at, like, Lucas Bretz, right? LRB Aquatics, he's doing something where it's, like, no filters, no air, no nothing in his tanks, right? In his whole fish room. Uh, Super simplified approach, right? Very, very simplistic approach. And then we have kind of the opposite side of the coin. You could look at, this is most typically found in salt water, but sometimes we find it in freshwater too. And I can give a freshwater example afterward. But people who lose like an Apex controller, and you've got this, you've got this, you have literally thousands upon thousands of dollars of equipment for one tank, right? And it's just crazy between all of the gear and tech that's going on and how they schedule this and that, and the complication that can come with trying to keep some of these more complicated systems. Is it overcomplicating? And so the example I would give in freshwater, there is a member of my club who keeps a discus tank. He has a bunch of wild discus that he got from Master Breeder Dean, right? Some of the babies from his wilds. And he's got this fairly good sized tank. I think it's a 75 gallon with 3 Fluval 407s for filtration. He uses multiple heaters, each set to very different temperatures so that it's not overstressing a single heater, and he has backups, right? And he has this complex thing where like literally every week he services a different filter and he just does them in rotation, right? So each filter is getting serviced at least once every 3 weeks. He does multiple water changes. It's heavily planted. He has a strong like EI style dosing schedule. CO2, the works. It's very complicated for what we would think of as a simple planted tank. And my thought here, and what I want to talk about is briefly, is are we taking some of these things to extremes? Now, you could say like, if this is what makes that person happy and they're fine doing that level of maintenance, then who cares, right? For the overcomplicated things. And I would say that's relatively accurate. But sometimes this comes in the sense of overcomplication might be in the things that we say are required to keep a tank. And often what we might leave out is that some people's view of what is required to do things successfully and for the best health of the fish versus maybe what we really need to look at is like, this is the suggested information, especially if you're maybe a more novice aquarist, or maybe it's your first time ever trying this particular species of fish or this particular style of tank, whatever that may be, right? Maybe that's when we say like, hey, we're going to add in some extra safeties, and here's kind of what I would suggest, but no less than this. And I think about that in like the tech perspective. In tech with like video games especially, or any software, we usually have like the minimum requirements and the recommended settings. And there's a huge delta between these two. And there's all sorts of room in there that will run the program or the game just fine. But maybe it's not to its absolute perfect highest caliber. And many of us don't need to run things at their highest caliber. So let's think about that for a second. There are often really extreme examples out there. Like, let's say that you're getting into aquascaping, right? And if you're watching someone like Green Aqua, they will suggest some fairly complicated levels of equipment or fairly expensive equipment for what they do to achieve the results they achieve. Do you necessarily need that? No. We might be overcomplicating things there. But is that what they know is the most likely to achieve the results that they are displaying to you? Probably. And that's why they say this is what you need, as opposed to, or this is what we suggest, as opposed to say like, well, here's a way you could do it. Right? On the flip side, oversimplifying things. I think creators do this a lot. I know that occasionally I do this too, where we might try to explain something to someone who's maybe like, hey, Bentley, I'm just getting into rainbow fish, and how many rainbow fish can I keep in my 75-gallon tank? Right? You can get a question like that. And we will often give a very simplistic answer. Sometimes, some people out there will give an answer, and maybe you've done this too, and you've talked to a friend who keeps fish and been like, oh, how many fish do you think I could keep in my 20-gallon tank? I'm like, oh, you could keep like 20 tetras, and that should be fine. Or you could probably keep like, I don't know, 10 tetras and like 4 or 5 corridoras, and maybe get yourself a pleco and some shrimp, and right, and we'll do this in really broad spectrum. Instead of going, okay, Bentley, I have a 75-gallon tank and I want to keep rainbow fish. And having me maybe go a little more in depth, because my initial answer, now granted, maybe I'm a bad example because I frequently will dive into these things, but I know there's times where I don't. I will think about things like, okay, well, what's your maintenance schedule like? What kind of filtration do you have? What's your planting like? What type of rainbow fish? Are we talking like some of the smaller, like a praecox? Or, like the Running River rainbow, some of these ones that only get about 3 inches? Or are we going to talk about like turquoise rainbows and some of the bigger fish that are going to get like 4.5 to 5 inches potentially? Because we'll want to think about, okay, how big are they going to get? And keeping them with decent swim space, we might need to adjust those numbers. Because if you're going to tell me I'm going to get Aves Creek bosemani versus I'm going to get turquoise, or I'm going to get, say, Melanitania pygmea, the pygmy rainbow fish, like one of the smallest big rainbows out there, those answers start changing. But I could generically answer it like, 12 rainbow fish is probably fine in a 75-gallon without any extra context, and that's like oversimplifying it, right? And we can take this to another level too. Let's talk about like the next level of oversimplification. The videos out there that tell you things like don't do water changes, or no filter tank. It's just have substrate and plants and they'll handle it for you, right? We could think of other scenarios that are an oversimplification of what is actually a complex understanding that allows you to have this simple tank. Right. And my biggest example here would be like very frequently, and I think a lot of people think that I'm trying to badmouth Wallstead method whenever I talk about this, but it's not. It's more that I think it's a misconception that most true Wallstead tanks are designed to have a very minimal amount of fish in the aquarium. Right. And they're designed to usually be filterless, although you certainly can run a filter with them and allow the plants to do the work. But in order to do that at a safe and simple level, we often have to do a very light stocking of a tank. So if we're doing a Wallstead 10-gallon, we probably don't want more than like 6 to 8 tetras in this tank. Very small bioload in the grand scheme of things. We don't want to go like putting 20 neon tetras in this tank, because now we're creating a bioload that it's probably not necessarily capable of handling in that aquarium. And now we can run into complications when we're thinking about our simple tank. And I think the biggest thing and why I wanted to talk about this is more that like often very complicated and or very simple things come down to actually a very good understanding of basic aquatics. Because very frequently, we will see a video that intrigues us, like, never do water changes, like, great, I don't want to have to do that extra maintenance. It takes me this long a week. What if I didn't have to do that ever again? Or like, you get some of us who are like, I've got an FX6 I haven't cleaned in 2 years. It's amazing, still works just fine. And you're like, all I have to do is get this filter and I don't have to clean this stupid thing for 2 years? Perfect. And what we start missing is the extra complexities, the things that allow us to do those kind of things, right? Which involve like not servicing a filter for so long because it's heavily planted, there's not a lot of fish in it, etc. Whatever those things may be, right? I think very often it's easy for us, whether it's as watchers of content or us again as creators of content, to make things seem too simple when there's little bits of understanding and complication that are there that allow it to be simple, or reasons that we maybe gloss over as to why we feel that extra complication, like those heavy levels of equipment and all this kind of stuff, are necessary. And my example would be this: if you had a 75-gallon and you were doing what my friend does with his discus, and you'd be like, this is crazy if you only kept like 4 or 5 discus, right? In a 75-gallon, like 3 different filters and servicing 1 a week and all this stuff, that's insane. But if I told you, like, and I think he has like 10 in there. It's not a ton, but he's very meticulous. But if I told you and said, oh, it's because he keeps, 30 discus in this big group in this tank, then you'd be like, well, yeah, you're going to need to maintain those things that often and have all that extra filtration to handle that bio load and keep it where you need to keep it for that many discus in a 75-gallon. This guy's crazy. I think we'll miss little pieces of, I hate to keep saying complexity, but like details that matter, that as to why we would make something more simplified or more complex. And I think it's on us as fish keepers to, if we're absorbing these bits of information, like how to have the tank that never gets a disease. I'm just going to make something up at this point because I don't want someone to think I'm picking a specific topic like Wallstat or no water change or whatever, or no filters, right? The no disease tank, or the all my fish will breed forever tank, whatever the heck it may be. It's important for us to look for those little details that help tell us why the more simplified process can work, or why it's necessary to go to a more complex level before we just bash and go do it. And from a creator perspective, I think it's on us, and very recently, Alex, now Fishtory, but previously Secret History, living in your aquarium, my good buddy Alex, had talked about a video now how there's kind of like 2 types of videos out there. And I think part of that ties into the educational side, where we need to do a little bit more diligence on the creator side of including some of those details, because I think they're very important to long-term success for new folks. And here's a great one. Tony Adams, who's in chat. Hi, Tony. So, hi, Bentley. I came across your channel a couple months ago. I have now fell for rainbow fish, so my next tank will be a 125. Nice. I've been eyeing the PetSmart Bozeman with Bozeman Atinjo as the centerpiece. All right. I can dig that. And we can look at some other examples here. There's a few things I want to cover that chat brought up. So like Kingfisher's Catch saying, when did oversimplifying and overcomplicating come back to bite you in the butt, right? So I think this is a great example. So overcomplication. Very early, when I came back to fish, and I did what is now my retirement tank. Well, I first set it up as a big display tank, and I put tons of different stuff in there, and I was trying to make it a little crazy and interesting, and I had CO2. And the way that I overcomplicated it is I pushed much more CO2 than that tank actually needed. And part of that was me not understanding that I have a lot of simpler plants in here and very few like medium requirement tank. I didn't have anything super high demanding. So I really don't need a lot of CO2 to get what I'm looking for. And how it bit me in the butt is by placing CO2 in that tank, in this tank that really didn't need it in the first place, and putting the CO2 levels a little high at first without some extra oxygenation, with a not so great regulator that I bought used. So here's all that extra complication I'm adding to this story, right? I had a kind of a gas off incident that caused a very dangerous high level CO2 in my tank, where I came in to feed my fish at one point, and several of my fish were up at the surface gasping. Right? And I looked over and I saw what was going on with my tank. And thankfully I was smart enough to realize I need to water change now. And I went and I grabbed an air pump off a different tank and I hurled it in there with the air stone just to get some oxygen moving. Immediately started draining that tank and bringing in fresh water to help get more oxygen and dilute that excess carbon dioxide down. So what I did is I did a 50% water change. And then I started immediately doing another like drain and 50% water change. Because I first had to get oxygen in there, and I had to keep water moving and doing all that stuff to help re-oxygenate this water, turn the gas completely off, right? But then after I've diluted it down, I just re-water changed and diluted it some more because I wanted to play it extra safe. And thankfully, I got lucky and didn't lose any fish. But I could have lost everything in that tank. And at the time, there was like 20 rainbows, a couple schools of different danios in there. I could have lost a lot of fish. And I would have been heartbroken. So there's kind of some overcomplications. I did more because I saw stuff online. I saw these beautiful aquascape tanks with CO2, and everybody's running like high CO2. But what I'm not paying attention to is some of the small details as to whether I would have needed higher or lesser CO2. I didn't have super aggressive growers in there, so I'm not going to have stuff that's going to produce tons of oxygen to offset that excess carbon dioxide. So what I really needed is the method that I've adopted now, that low and slow. So let's go the other side of the coin. Oversimplification. When I was trying to raise a number of rainbow fish from eggs, okay, I lost a species that is extremely rare now in the United States and Europe, which is the Glossolepis maculosus. And part of how I was keeping him, I had him in one of the little German breeding rings in an established tank that had some adult rainbow fish. So they were just getting to a certain size before I transferred them to their own tank. Because this is while I was like kind of feverishly setting up what is now my main fish room in the house, the one that has the Guppy Mansion in it and has changed several times. I was setting up some spare tanks in that to get extra room. So I was using it there, right? And one of the ways that I oversimplified, it was just like, oh, this should be simple. I can just feed them, and it's reliant on the filter in the tank. So I'll just keep this to the side away from the filter, and it'll handle all the things. But the part that I didn't think about, and I learned this unfortunately the hard way, is the mesh on the bottom of that German breeding ring is extremely fine. So I still have to be very, very, very controlled about the amount of food going in there and potentially even cleaning it if I don't have something like Corydoras or a type of loach that will actually suck the extra stuff from the other side of that mesh. And what ended up happening is it built up too much debris and caused, I think it's a fungus, which is why I lost I believe, I haven't proved this for certain, but just I've done the kind of the games in my head and the scenario in my head, and that's what I think happened to cause me to lose my maculosus, because they're so close to it that they're going to constantly look for food, and they're in just this thin amount of water, and they're going to pick at it. I lost all of them, which was like 45 babies or so in about a day and a half. Because I didn't, and like I tried to clean it after I started losing a few, right? But at that point, it was too late because they'd all been exposed to it. The bigger fish down in the tank didn't bother them at all. But these very fragile little baby fish were exposed to it. So by oversimplifying, thinking like, oh, this filter is just going to take care of everything, I don't necessarily need to be as meticulous about little food particles in this little ring that's sectioned off. I oversimplified and I lost an entire species of fish. Granted, they were all like a week olds when this started happening, so they're very young, and that's when rainbows are super fragile, but still, oversimplified it, bit me in the butt, right? So I think there's a hope, like this rambling thing has brought some ideas into your own heads to help you out. Got some other things here that I want to cover, questions and stuff. So Luke Wang, simple. I never test my water on schedule. Not so simple. I don't do it because I know that about 50% water change every 3 days means nothing will ever build up. Always depending on how you run your own setup. Right. So simplistic of like not having to test on a certain schedule because you've learned over time, and this is the complication and experience, that if I'm water changing this amount very frequently, nothing's really building up that I need to test for it. I probably only needed to test if something goes crazy wrong out of nowhere, and then most likely that's some more isolated thing, right? Very, very good. Very good example there. Liquid Zoo. 3 Oscars and a common pleco by FX6 needs cleaned monthly and takes more than 30 minutes to clean. It's so gross. You got some big poop in there, that's why. All right. Leo 209. The Bentley Batmobile line is worth it. Y'all need an idea for a Planet 10-gallon tank. Fish and plants, it's a co-op light. Okay, so you want an idea for a 10-gallon Planet tank. Have you done a shrimp tank yet, Leo? I think if you haven't tried shrimp yet, you should do a shrimp tank. I think with all the stuff you've done, you haven't really been able to keep shrimp yet, right? 10 gallons are perfect for shrimp because you can have lots of plants, give them lots of space to graze on. And you can let that tank establish for a while before you put the shrimp in. Otherwise, you need to feed the shrimp pretty heavy at first. But yeah, that'd be I'd go for. I'd try to do a shrimp tank. That comes from the guy who is not good at shrimp. I would try to do a shrimp tank. Nabokov fan. Regarding the concept of oversimplicity, my thoughts after watching high detail aquascaping videos all week was how this happens so much. Those fine details of every step are so easily omitted. Example, how exactly specifically to trim a plant of a specific species. Tuck it in the hardscape, right? So like you're talking about like how, very often we'll talk about Java fern where you just like, oh, you just tuck it in the hardscape, it's an epiphyte, it'll just do its thing, right? And not necessarily like, well, you kind of need the plant to be about this size so that it will friction fit, and then as new roots grow up, they'll grab on and hold itself in place. So don't put it in like a high flow area, that'll knock it out, right? Some of the little things there that they've just learned over time, and it's kind of just known knowledge that maybe isn't being explained in that high level aquascaping video. I think it's a good example. Good example. All right. At this point, folks, just so you know, we're open for normal questions at Bentley Pasco. Makes it super easy for me to see them. We've got a few, but yeah. Sid Miller, I'm just going to say Father Fish is wrong. I don't know that like any person is ever like truly wrong because there's so many ways to do something. And this isn't me trying to play like the nice political game. I think part of it is like lately in his videos, he has used titles that bring a level of controversy. But if you watch the video in its entirety and realize that his concepts apply to doing things the way that he does them with his deep sand bed and in his style of tank, so now there's all this context that applies to why he says this, then it starts to make a little more sense and becomes not necessarily wrong so much as like a way to do things, but maybe not the way that you or I would prefer, right? I don't think any person is ever truly fully wrong, because so often, like, and you guys have heard me say this before, there's always at least like 11 answers to a solution is a way that I've always like been taught. There's so many different ways to come to a solution to a problem, or just to how to approach something successfully, big quotation marks, right? In the sense that success really depends on you and I. Do I view success as just having a tank that I enjoy, even though like there's algae on the glass and people complain about me not having perfect water levels all the time? Yeah, I still enjoy that tank. Whereas someone else might like freak out because the glass isn't perfectly clear. How dare the water level never be perfect at all times? Why do you have a sponge filter in this tank? X, Y, and Z, right? It's all in the eye of the beholder, and in that case, the beholder is us. So I think there's some nuance there, but I think it's very easy to go off of, say, the titles of his videos recently, or maybe just some of like the early premise before he explains what he's saying. And granted, I've only watched like 2 videos from him in the last, I think, 4 months. So context is king here, and I've only watched like 2, the no water change and one other. Um, but it might not be how you or I would want to approach things, because maybe if you're someone like me, I have no interest in doing the deep sand bed tank. I hate sand. I don't, aesthetically, it's not pleasing to me very often. With my water and the way that my local area is, with sand, it's very easy to get cyanobacteria, just because of the excess silicates and stuff that typically come with most sands. So I tend to avoid sand. I don't necessarily like it. Most of my fish, if I have them on sand, their color washes out and they don't look as good because I keep rainbows everywhere. So I'm inherently wanting to keep dark substrate. There's only one option for dark substrate in sand, and that's like the black blasting sand, and I don't like that stuff. I've had it in tanks before, can't stand it. Don't want to ever have it again. So following like Father Fish's advice and where it can be a solution is never going to work for me because I'm not going to adopt his system, right? I have no reason to because it's not something I enjoy. So in that case, he's totally wrong for me, but I don't think he's wrong for everyone. I think if people want to follow his system, do that deep sand bed, with the planting that he does and kind of lighter fish stocking, it can work just fine. But maybe it's the presentation that's not necessarily the best. No, sometimes stuff's just done for clicks and views, man. That's kind of the sad part. There are far worse creators than Father Fish when it comes to that part. Oh, I think I missed something because Chad jumped on me. Okay, no, I'm starting to catch up. Good. Craig's Catfish Cave. Breeding fish like I do no water changes would not work. My tanks are heavily planted, but they're heavy duty stock tanks. Yeah, so that's a great example. Like understanding that no water change works in certain ways, and for your system totally would not work. Right? Understanding that is critical because that's where the oversimplified no water change quickly could become a problem because you don't have that more complex understanding of like, well, not with my density of fish and the way that I'm doing this, that wouldn't work, right? It's good. You're doing it the right way. Fair Undergraph. Is there a way I can put a picture of my 32 flex for everyone to see it? If you email it to me, Farron. Yes. Let me just make sure my email's in chat for you because I can rip it off. It's not easy to. YouTube prevents like watchers from doing a lot of that stuff, but if you shoot me a picture really fast, then I can. Isabel. Hi, Bentley. Could you please give me your opinion on this one? At what intervals should I service my canister filter in a Waze 350 for a 55 gallon? I change 1/3 of the water weekly. You know what I would do, honestly, Isabel? Depending on the version of the foam you have on the pre-filter, if you have the super fine, like 60 PPI or whatever that comes with it initially, I would just literally clean that pre-filter out once a week. Like, do your water change, right? Or maybe what you do is you clean the pre-filters, put them in, then do your water change. And that's your maintenance each week, because just cleaning those probably only take you 10 minutes or so, right? And then realistically, you probably only need to actually service the whole of the canister with that super fine pre-filter maybe once every 6 months. It depends on how many fish you're keeping in that 55 gallon. You probably could go a whole year without servicing it because most of the gunk and yuck that is going to get deeper into the canister at that super fine pre-filter is getting caught right there. So there's very little going deeper and you'll be generally okay. Now, if you have super high levels, right, of fish in your tank, then maybe that changes a little bit. If you're using the more coarse ones, I think I'm using the 40 PPI now, and I love them. I think they're great. I have that, and I have a coarse intake filter on mine to like really pre-filter. I basically have to do my coarse filter and my pre-filter on the Awaze once every 2 weeks in my big rainbow fish tank. But almost nothing gets all the way into the canister itself. So I can basically not service the rest of the canister, but maybe once a year. But I don't have a super high stocking in that tank either. It's 75 gallons. It has like it's 5 rainbow fish, doja loaches, which they're weird, and then some white clouds. So it's not really a big level of bio load. It all comes down to like your maintenance. I think with you doing 1/3 water changes weekly, if you're just cleaning those pre-filters weekly also, you probably don't need to really touch the rest of that canister for 6 months to a year easily with the schedule you're doing, unless you have a super high like fish density or stuff that just does some serious bio load, like a ton of plecos for an example, because plecos make a very large bio load. Mike Stambaugh, Swiss Tropical sells the extra large breeding rings now. I like it better than my smaller rings. I think the large. I tried one small. I didn't like it. I'd have to see like what the difference in size of the extra large ring is. My only problem is that mesh. I need something slightly less fine of a mesh. And honestly, having looked at, I linked it before in the community tab, but there's a guy who's got a really cool system based on Dean system that are all 3D printed, and he put the schematics up for everybody. So if you have a 3D printer, you can make your own, but basically the breeding trays like that. I like that system so much better than those rings, assuming you have the ability to make them, that I would just stick to that personally. Long term, that's what I'm looking at. Lady Diane, those gasping fish are scary. When I saw it, I did the same thing, nearly 100% water change. Yeah, it was terrifying because I had all these big, beautiful rainbows, and I was just freaked that, I was going to lose all these fish that were in my care, and I really loved watching. It was like about an hour of just being paranoid as all get out. But after the second water change, everybody was swimming pretty normal. We just kept the gas off for a few days, and then when I brought it back on, I literally had it. I remember 135 gallon tank. I had it at 2 bubbles a second. I was pushing so little gas into that tank, and it turns out it's like I really only needed like 3 to 4, and that ended up being perfect for the period of time that I had CO2 on that tank before I started moving stuff around my fish room. Leo 209. So what's with all the buildup on planted tanks? What's the best way to get mulm off the top of planted substrate without taking the substrate with it? Okay. So you're gonna kind of take a little substrate if you try to dig in. But realistically, one thing to keep in mind is that if you're getting excess mulm on the very top, then you can just skim the top like you would sand and suck up most of that mulm. Some mulm getting into the substrate is perfectly okay because the natural, like, biological process with bacteria and stuff are going to break down that waste and turn it into, effectively speaking, inert mulm. And that mulm just acts as a nutrient source down in the substrate, which makes it available at the roots of your plants. Now, if you have like a bunch of big plecos making a big mess, yeah, every once in a while you got to go through and sweep it up some and clean it up. Like Luke is explaining, you can use a smaller hose with a larger gravel vac cylinder, so that creates a stronger like force pull in the siphon to remove those things. But not, how do I put this? It's good for sucking stuff up, but it's not pulling so hard that like you might rip plants out. So I don't think like super strong, nothing too crazy. But there's ways. You basically just skim the top and get the stuff off the top. If it starts sinking down, don't stress too much about that. The natural bacteria in your tank is gonna take care of it within a reasonable period of time, and it probably will never get to, because it's not like all that mulm just appeared immediately and it's all toxic, right? It's a slow process of it coming in. Bacteria does its thing, does its voodoo, the nitrogen cycle occurs, and it becomes kind of inert excess nutrient that is then in your gravel. So if you have a decent substrate, it's going to absorb some of that through its CEC capacity, right? There's going to be all this nice little biologic bacteria processes happening down there in the substrate that makes it available to your plants. I very rarely gravel vacuum my tanks. And the only ones I do are the ones that have a number of plecos in them, because the systems take care of themselves. If you've taken the time to really establish the tank, they will take care of themselves. It's just done for aesthetics. Just on an update on my 50-gallon lowboy Hillstream Loach are doing great. I acclimated them for 4 days, but now I want another type of fish. Any recommendations? So you're in something that's already kind of like fast paced. I can't remember if you're heating it. I would assume you are, given that you're using Hillstream Loaches. But there's lots of Hillstreamy type fish that would do well. White clouds are a great example if you want a nice, smaller schooling fish. Now, if you want more like surface dwelling fish, there's several different types of other hill streams that have different patterns and look really cool and are different than the standard hill stream loach that you could look at. But you've got things like auto sinkless too, if you want to go that route. Trying to think what else. Danios, lots of your Danios are really good at handling high speed water because they're inherently from faster water systems. So there's tons of options out there. The question just becomes like, are you wanting another like rock dwelling, surface dwelling fish? Gobies, right? You could do gobies. Gobies are really cool. Just don't get the ones that want to bury themselves. Get the more rock dwelling gobies. That gives you another kind of option of a cool, different fish that you could put into that style of tank. You need to send me some pictures of your lowboy when you get a chance, by the way. I want to see this bad boy. Let's see here. Legion Aquatics. Why are zebra plecos so expensive? I understand that no freshwater fish that look cool, but why so expensive? Okay, so there's a couple of reasons why zebra plecos and some of the other plecos are crazy expensive. Number one, they're export banned. So we cannot correctly get any wild caught fish anymore. Two, for zebra plecos to reach sexual maturity, they typically have to be about 3.5 years or older. You usually cannot sex a zebra pleco, an L046, before 3 years of age. So that means it can be very difficult when you're buying zebra plecos to know whether or not you're going to have male-female pairs in the first place. Now, add on to that, you can't export them anymore, and they breed more prolifically in the wild than they do in captivity, in the sense that there's just so much more of them. There's big open spaces, lots of food sources, etc. Significantly higher population too, as opposed to captivity. They take a long time to reach sexual maturity, so you just have to play this long waiting game before you can breed them. And then second, the average clutch of zebra pleco eggs is about 10 to 12 eggs. Low side 8, lucky is like 15. And a female will typically only lay eggs once every month if she's extremely well fed and you're in like spring, summer. They won't do this all year round. There are times where they actually go kind of off and will not have eggs for 3-4 months at a time. So they're a challenge to breed because of time and number. Unlike, say, bristlenoses, where like many common bristlenoses that we see out there will reach their sexual maturity in about 1.5 years. And then their first clutch is usually like 25 to 40 fish. But eventually you get to the point of where a clutch of eggs is 100 babies. Right? And some of these species are different. Like the wabbit mooster never gets clutches that big. Their clutches are typically like 20 to 30. But if you think of like the super reds, right? You can get clutches of like 100 fish. I mean, just stupid numbers of babies per clutch. And a female will lay those eggs without fail once a month. As long as everybody's well fed and feeling good and doing all the things they need to do to make that keep rolling, right? Just compare the numbers. That's why they're so expensive, right? It's a matter of there's lots of difficulties in breeding them and raising them. They grow slower than your ancestress as well. So typically about an inch is the size that we're looking for to sell a pleco as a pleco breeder. It takes about 6.5 to 9 months to get a zebra pleco baby to an inch. A lot like rainbow fish. It's a very slow process. The only difference is rainbow fish will breed far more prolifically once they've reached breeding size, which in rainbows can be as early as 6 months. Whereas with that zebra pleco, we're talking 3.5 years. Other interesting things I've seen talking to zebra pleco breeders in the past, my own experience with zebra plecos, it seems like the male-female ratios of zebra plecos raised in captivity are way off. They're very male-heavy. So for every, say, clutch of eggs of, let's say, 10, you might only get like 2 females. But you have to wait like 3 years to know. So that further complicates the already like complicated cycle we're dealing with when it comes to zebra plecos, which is part of why they're just so expensive. And they're carnivorous. And they have a high demand and desire, so inherently that pushes the price up. Sucks, I know, but it's unfortunately life with that particular fish. They're a tough one. They are tough. Connor Costello, are there any plants that could survive a turtle in a pond or way to keep some plants? I would think that some of the the big pond lilies or some of your stronger reedy type plants. You can think like cat's tails and things like that. Some of the more robust plants would stand a better chance with turtles in ponds because you'll see that in the wild, right? Water lettuces can do okay. They might eat some of them, but they propagate so fast you probably don't have to worry about it. It'll be tough to do it with some of your finer leaf plants and some of the stuff that we might keep in an aquarium that also works in a pond, just because it's so much softer and not as tough that a turtle will easily eat those things. Similar to how they would eat like spinach or any other like green leaf lettuce as an example. So I would be looking at things that have more of like a reed type texture to their stems, especially. Just you want that stuff that's a little tougher, more robust, more fibrous. They're less likely to probably see that as a food source. They might try it once or twice, but then afterward be like, nah, it's not as easy to eat as this other thing. And then they might start leaving them alone. That'd be my best guess, Connor. Hopefully that helps you out. Oh man, we're already almost at 7 o'clock. Jeez. Chisano, yes, a lot of river rocks, 2 Wavemaker and Powerhead. Gobies sound like a great idea. At the moment, I don't know if I want to breed them, so ideal to make only 1 species. Yeah, if you'd like them to breed, I would keep it to 1 species of the loaches in a tank. But yeah, there's tons of great gobies that Dan's Fish regular gets in, so that would be one I would check out, right? Lots of options there. Alec Kumanoff, what's up, buddy? Ocean Aquarium in San Francisco, love that place. It's awesome, and their owner is fantastic. Well known for the no water change tanks, lightly stocked feeding, deep sand, deep substrate bed, very heavily planted, some CO2, and uses a diatom filter for the heavily stocked larger fish. Yeah, so you can see where like no water change quickly becomes much more complex with that example, right? Because you're looking at a series of things that he does that allows that system to work the way it works, right? And I think that's one of the things that maybe is easy to forget is that the details matter. What is it, man? The Reacher TV show. Did anybody watch that on Amazon Prime? I loved that show. It was so good. There's a part where he specifically says details matter in an investigation, and it's very. I don't read the books, by the way, so I'm not like one of those. I like the particular actor who's playing Reacher. I've seen him in a bunch of both serious and comedic roles, and I just like him as an actor. So that had me hooked on that show, and then that show is just also very, very good. So yeah, what do you do? Okay, Connor Costello, let's play You Scape Plant My Tank. I want a river style scape. Oh god, oh no, with an AquaClear 20. With an AquaClear for 20 gallons and a 20 long. What should I do? Lots of hides. So you're probably going to, in a 20 long, I would be using like an AquaClear 50 or even potentially a 70 to get the kind of like river flow I want. I would first be looking at a good amount of rock work. So now I want things that I can poke into the rock work that will do well. So I'm going to use some of my finer leaf Java fern. I'm gonna use some probably Anubias and or Boos, right? Because those all come from like river systems. And then for some of my longer plants that I want to do something interesting, if I want something that's high demand that I'm gonna have to trim often, I'm gonna look at either Rotala Enie, Enie, or Rotala Wallichii. Those are the super fine leaf. They kind of look like an old school feather duster in a way, where they have this very fine kind of puffy leaves, or very fine leaves that create this like kind of puff to them. But they naturally grow very well in high flow, and they sit and they do this kind of cool wave to them, and they look beautiful. They have lots of oranges, a little bit of yellows and reds, especially in the Wallichii. And you can get a green variant too, so you can have greens and reds doing this like wavy pattern in the water, and it looks beautiful. So yeah, and Luke is kind of getting at part of what I say is like you'd use the rock work where your output flow is from your thing to kind of create a false waterfall look, and that's where you could put like your booses and some of your other stuff, right? And then down the way toward the end of the tank is where you'd put some of the longer plants that kind of wave in the water. Some chef's kiss would look pretty good. Ah, man. Okay. I'm trying to get one more. I could probably do two. Sid Miller. I've had conflicting reports, but I do want more males or females when I'm breeding pseudomagills. More females. I got 2 males, 1 female at an auction. I was wondering if that was what breeding looks for. So males will compete with each other and like practically harass a singular female. What I like is if you're doing 2 males, anywhere between 3 and 5 females, if you're trying to really actively breed. That way each female gets a little bit of break, but the males have lots of targets to spawn with. And then get yourself a mop and you'll be fine. So just get more females and you'll be all right. I would target anywhere between 3 and 5, preferably more on that 5 side, if you got the room. Legion Aquatics. I always get hair algae in my planted tanks. How do I get rid of it? Is it growing all over? It's growing all over my moss and stems in the other tank. The plants are still growing as well, but so is the algae. So, okay, hair algae is very complicated, right? The big thing is very frequently it means that one thing is out of balance in our tank, and we need to make slow adjustments over time to get that under control. Usually it's too much or too little light. And this is the sucky part, is it can be either side of the spectrum in combination with the level of fertilization that we're giving our plants. If we don't have a lot of super aggressive growers, but we're putting too much stuff in, or we have too bright of light, then that's going to cause hair algae. And all we need to do is slowly adjust one thing at a time. So the first thing I would look at is I would start with light. If you're using like one of my planted tank settings and it's one of the stronger ones, I just dial it back a little bit. Bring it back like 10% and the maximums, right, of all the high stuff. And the blues are probably super low if you're using any of my settings on a light, right? Then, oh man, my internet's being a butt. Hopefully this does not buffer too much. Or the alternative is, like as Omar is saying in chat, get some fast-growing plants and add them in there to help kind of counteract and fight the algae as you start working on this process. What's your fertilization regime? Are you fertilizing only once a week and you're in, say, like a 40-gallon tank? Try to break that up and see if we can have that coming in smaller doses over time. Yeah, last week Comcast had some like major damage that happened to parts of their system, and they're still kind of recovering in my area because somebody decided to like cut fiber lines, actually terribly not far from my home. So, yeah, Comcast has been having some issues, to say the least. They're not the best service provider in the first point, but they're like literally the only fast service provider I can get because, options or not. There's an M word. I think it's a board game. Monopoly? Yeah, I think that's what it's called. Anyway. But yeah. So if you're really having trouble Legion, shoot me a mail, but we can slowly dial some stuff and try to look at it and work on it. But I like taking it slow at a time. Like to fight the hair algae I was dealing with in Fallen Forest after first setting it up and having some stuff struggle. It took me 3.5 months of just slowly making adjustments, getting things under balance, making small changes, and watching, observing, and working with it to get it under control to where I have almost no hair algae at this point, and I've almost completely beaten it back. It's just a process. And if we take it slow and don't panic, yeah, it sucks that it takes time, but it's the right way to get it where we want to be so that we're not dealing with it in the future. Hopefully that helps. Okay, I can probably do one more fairly fast. Farron, you're having trouble with coming back. It might be that the picture is too large, which is unfortunate. We'll figure it out, though. We'll figure it out. Okay. Sam Harris, I want to get an Aqua Sky light for my 20-gallon high tank. What length light should I get? 18 or 24 or the 26 too? I would start. So me personally, I try to get the light so that the fixture covers the entire length. Right? So when it's 18 to 24, then that means the fixture itself is the 18 inches and the legs expand. I would try to get something that starts at 24 inches to cover the whole width of the tank. That way, I don't have dim spots unless I purposely am like moving the light in a way to do so. That light is not super powerful, but it's enough. So that's what you can easily do long term. Hope that helps. Hope that helps. Yeah, Felipe Oliveira specifically talks about using floating plants as a solution, right, to bring down light to make it easier when it comes to some of your algae, which, for those of you who might not know, like we recently, 2 months ago or so, lost Felipe Oliveira. It's very sad. He was a wonderful, wonderful man and a fantastic aquascaper. But he'd been battling, I believe it's cancer, if I remember correctly. But man, if you haven't watched some of the videos of Felipe that are out there, do so. He's just a wonderful person that was in this hobby, brought all sorts of joy. He was a very jovial person. I wish I would have had an opportunity to meet him in person, but I've watched a ton of stuff that he's done, and kind of sad that we lost him. But yeah, on that, gang, I think that is where we're gonna end it for tonight, just because it's our time, and I gotta go eat dinner. I haven't eaten since like 10 a.m. So I had a really late breakfast and didn't do anything else. But yeah. Oh, interesting. Using it to encourage stem plants. Yeah, no, restricting light's not a way to encourage stems. But some people think that way. But yeah. Anyway, gang, I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I know that many of you could be doing all sorts of interesting things in the beautiful sunny weather, but maybe some of you are in those hotter places, like a friend of mine who's in Arizona dealing with 100-degree temperature, who's just hiding from it right now, and I don't blame you if you are. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and stay awesome. And have a good rest of your week. Very soon, fish tour, Eurofish, coming. Look forward to it, all right?